Cool. So welcome back. Making our way. We're almost towards the last section of the book. And we're at this point in the book where we have sort of covered some methods to kind of answer the first question in this work, which is, who am I? And that's sort of the process we go through, where we sort of try to eliminate objects in our awareness by not paying attention to them in our meditation, by maintaining like single-pointed attention. And by doing that, we sort of, the analogy we use was we merge objects into this single point because, our attention is fully on this one point. So there's nothing else available for perception. And because of that, we sort of try to investigate and see that what does this awareness look like when it is not blemished by other, I would say, other objects in the awareness. And once we get there, we start to realize that, oh, this place is actually pretty blissful, and I want to be here. I don't want to go anywhere else. And then and that's kind of, a great place to get to, but then we don't want to stop there. And then the next process begins in this work, which is answering the second question, which is, what is this world? Because now I know who I am. Now I want to know what this world is. And then we go through the second process of saying that this world is nothing but the self as well. Right now, this world is, confusing and terrorizing and, grabs us in different ways, and we kind of get sucked into it. Because we have a wrong understanding of what it is. So the solution to that is to have a right understanding of what I am in the beginning. And then once we have a clear understanding of that, we move into like actually analyzing what the world is. So we don't pay attention to the world in the first step. And in the second step, we start to see what the world is as well. And that's kind of where this book is at this point. And the world, like I said, the world is nothing but the self. And a good analogy to kind of understand that is, if you're looking at a mirror and, there's a bunch of objects in front of the mirror. In the mirror, you're going to see a lot of things, a lot of movement, a lot of diversity in terms of color, all of that, right? Like motion. So you may look at the mirror and say, wow, that's like a beautiful image. Or, if there's a terrifying thing in there, you could say, oh, wow, that's a scary thing in there. So because of the thing inside the mirror, we fail to notice that there is a mirror. And the only way to actually notice that it's a mirror is to, stop everything and kind of like pause. So you're not distracted by the motion in the mirror. And maybe like, even remove stuff. So like, remove all the objects in front of the mirror. And what remains is just a clear glass or like, clear mirror. And in those moments when it's fully clear, you can see, oh, this is what the mirror looks like. And then, once the images start coming back, because we've had this clear perception of the mirror, you're never going to forget that there is a mirror behind. Even though there may be a lot of like, diversity of movement and diversity of objects in there. So that's kind of a similar analogy here, which is, I noticed that there is this mirror of consciousness, you could say, that is reflecting this world in it. Diverse world, everybody's world is different based on like their own memory and their own past experiences. And what thoughts I have about this world are based on those, based on that memory. And I project that, and this mirror of consciousness will sort of reveal it for me. Just like the mirror, the physical mirror reveals the objects which are, in front of the mirror. Just like that, this mirror of consciousness will reveal my thoughts, my emotions, other people, other objects in this world to me. And then when I remove all of these objects from it, I get a clear perception of this mirror of consciousness. I'm like, oh, this is what this consciousness is. And then once the objects come back, I know that they're nothing but stuff in the consciousness itself. So they're not apart from consciousness, you can say. Just like, the objects in the mirror cannot exist apart from the mirror. Like if there was no mirror, you wouldn't see the reflection, right? The fact that there's a mirror means that there's going to be reflection. It's like a cause and effect. In the same way, my subjective experience of this world is because of consciousness. And the consciousness is appearing as my thoughts, it's appearing as this world, it's appearing as my emotions. All of that has the basis that there is consciousness. And consciousness reveals everything. So that's kind of the analogy that, can get close to this experience, but, obviously it has its limitations because the mirror, has external things. Whereas, for us, there is no kind of external, like everything is in consciousness. So that's where we're at. We're going to get a little bit, deeper into this analogy, and maybe we're going to go through different examples. But any thoughts or questions about what we've covered so far? Okay, if not, let us proceed into the text. I'll share my screen. And I believe we're at verse 51. So let's start there. Brahma anitya sukhastin hitvam sukha nivartataha ghatastadi pavat sarvasthaha swatnareva prakashate. So the self-abiding Jivan Mukta, relinquishing all his attachments to the fleeting joys of the outer world and satisfied with the bliss derived from the Atman, shines inwardly like a lamp placed inside a jar. So we're given a new word here called Jivan Mukta. I'm not sure if we have covered this in the past, but essentially this is a person who has realized the self while living. So there's a lot of examples where people get realized in the final moment of death, where they leave the body. And, that's called Mahasamadhi. That's like the word we use in this work, where a person is sort of reunited and freed from this body. And, the Atman kind of merges, you could say, in, that's just like a visual thing, but it's not really like you merge, but like at least you let go of the limitations of the body, and then you kind of become a free sort of Atman, I suppose. That's the closest you can get to it in terms of language, but that happens in the moment of death. But this work and this process is about getting realized here and now, which is how do I get self-realized, while having a body. And once you go through this process, you become what is a Jivan Mukta when realization happens when you're still alive. So this person who has realized the self, because they have realized the self, they are able to relinquish their attachments, which means that what they clearly understand what their worldly desires are, and the worldly desires can only give fleeting joys, which means that joys which are temporary. Because what is something, what if you look at any desire that we have, what's going to happen when we get that object of desire? We're going to feel satisfied, but for some amount of time. Notice from your own experiences in the past, whatever you have wanted, have they provided like lasting and satisfying bliss? Have they? And the answer is, you can answer it yourself. Like maybe you had some sort of satisfaction for some amount of time, but then once you got used to the object, or that became your new normal, the satisfaction went away. So the Jivan Mukta clearly sees this is true, and that's the first step. But the second step is actually even further, which is what happens when I get what I want. When I get what I want, the bliss of the self is revealed for a moment. And for a moment, it could be a second, it could be for a minute, it could be for an hour. But essentially what's happening is the mind is freed from desire. And because the mind is freed from desire, the self, which is the background, like the mirror, is kind of peeping through, and there's lesser objects in the mirror, like what we were talking about earlier. So because there's fewer objects in the mirror, because my mind is not wanting and craving stuff, the bliss is kind of released. It's kind of easily available. It's kind of like there's a nice breeze which is flowing by. But the moment the mind kind of comes back and says, oh, actually, I want this other thing. I want, money, or I want this relationship. I want to be successful. I want to look good. Then the mind has sort of blocked this breeze. It's put up like a giant wall. And now the breeze is not accessible. When the object of desire comes and I get what I wanted because I said, I want to be, recognized by my boss at work, and I want to look very good. You struggle maybe, and you get it. And then for a moment, what happens? This wall is sort of like loose, dropped for some amount of time. And then the breeze is available again. This is happening all the time. And this Jivan Mukta, who is a person who has realized the self, has come to this direct experience and understanding. And now, because of this, mind has let go of all of its craving, this bliss and this breeze is always available, because that is the nature of the self. And once the self is perceivable, there is no point when the self is not. Like, when are you not shining? When are you not you? When are you not like revealing stuff in this world? It's all the time. So this satisfaction and this bliss is available all the time. And the analogy here is like shines inwardly like a lamp placed in a jar. So the jar is this body. So you are still going to have a body. You're still going to have a mind and an intellect. You're still going to feel emotions. You're still going to have thoughts. But this lamp, which is this sort of light which is shining, or maybe this breeze which is blowing, is always on. At all moments. And you may, focus on a project, and you may try to solve some problem because, there is something that's going on. Your mind can go there, solve it, engage in the activity. And once it's done, it can come back. Or maybe you do it and then you fail at it because, you weren't able to successfully complete the thing that's needed to be done, and you fail. That doesn't change the fact that this lamp is still on. You can still come back to the lamp. So the successful or the unsuccessful outcome of your endeavors in life now will not have any effect on who you are, on this lamp that is shining. And that's the freedom. And that's why this person is liberated or is free, because right now most of our experience is that I'm bound by what I do, what happens, all of that. And to some degree, the body will still sort of have, the relationship with those things. So, your body is going to decay, as you grow old, you're going to get disease, you're going to maybe, feel sick. And the consequences that, there will be suffering from the level of the body, but from the level of this awareness, there's no suffering. And that's where we create the sense of distance, which is like, I can see that my body is in pain, but I am not in pain. And that kind of flips. So even, physical suffering or even mental torment can be, we can kind of be a lot more graceful and go through the process without kind of, getting too caught up, because there is a place we can go to, which is beyond both the body and the mind. Any thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I have a question. Should we understand the idea of attachment to the external world to necessarily be a negative thing? I feel like it may be in Buddhism, and I'm not sure, but I'm kind of curious. In Buddhism, it seems more around trying to remove those attachments. But it seems like there's different types, right? You could be attached to, I don't know, some temporary junk food craving, but there's also attachments your family or your pets or something like that.
Yeah.
So how do we understand this idea?
Yeah. So desire by itself is not an impediment to realization. So I would say, there's this, the renunciation, the world of renunciation where, you have to become a monk or a nun or somebody who has to give up this thing, is a misunderstanding of what the actual meaning of renunciation. Renunciation is only renouncing what is known as an attachment, and we can go into what that means. So we're only renouncing our attachments to things. It doesn't mean that we don't engage with things. So we can still have a desire to, want to play with my dog or want to eat this food. That's just a desire. But our attachment is essentially like, if that doesn't happen, let's say because I don't have time to go to this place to eat it, or if I cannot, my dog dies, or like, whatever, things change. Now my attachment basically means that I cannot live without it. And that's the suffering that gets created, because I think that the happiness is in the object itself. So I think that happiness is in the fact that I play with my dog, and hence I feel happy. So that if that understanding becomes that, oh, when I play with my dog, what is happening? The dog, I'm using the dog as a way to access the bliss of my own self. Because when I play with my dog, my mind has quietened down. I'm only focused on like, playing with my dog. I'm not thinking about the stuff I have going on in the world. So for a moment while I'm playing with my dog, the dog has revealed the bliss of myself, because the mind has quietened down. What happens when I eat junk food? I'm feeling uneasy. And I say, oh, junk food, that tastes pretty good. I eat junk food, but while I'm eating junk food, what has happened? My mind has quietened down again, because I'm not thinking about other stuff. I'm using the junk food to access the bliss of the self. So we need to start.
Kind of, I understand the junk food example, but like with my dog, there's times where like I'm kind of busy. I don't really want to play with it or walk it, but it's like I love my dog, and like, yeah, like I care about my dog, so I want it to be happy, even if I'm not necessarily happy in that moment.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, that's the nature of our, of who we are is extremely generous and extremely benevolent. We want everybody around us to be actually happy. And that's great. So, that doesn't mean that, so what's getting conflated here is your sense of love and the sense of attachment. Love is infinite, right? What is really love? Love is essentially just genuinely caring about the well-being of this other thing, or this other animal, or a human, or other.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so there's like a distinction between love and attachment. I see.
Yeah. So love is always there. Like once you realize that you are love, it's not even that you have love. We realize that we are love, which is that we genuinely care about other people or other beings or other, living things. And that's infinite. That's always, it's like, the sun is just shining and just like radiates its love, no matter what. I just want the well-being of everyone around me. Why should I only care about my dog and not about this other dog? Right? The sense of what happens is our sense of identity comes in, and we say, oh, this is mine and this is not mine, so I only care about mine. But that's the mind coming in. So once the mind drops, then the sense of identity isn't there. So then how you feel and how you behave is kind of the same. With your dog, you may have a little bit more, I would say you'll be closer to your dog because you just have a dog and you're interacting with a lot more. But like the sense of love, the feeling of that would be the same if you're with your dog or with another dog, right? It's just that when your mind comes in and says, oh, this is mine and this dog isn't mine, and then there's this confusion, and then you kind of change your behavior. But does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that answer.
Yeah. So look, attachments will automatically fall away once we realize that what are desires, and why do I have these attachments in the first place? It's because I have this misunderstanding that the object of attachment is the one that is joy producing or misery producing. I'm attached to, let's say, my dog, or I'm attached to this relationship, or I'm attached to this, maybe like a physical object, but they're all because I think that this object has joy producing properties. But actually, in fact, you're using the object to access the self. And once that understanding is like a real understanding, then the grip of the objects is going to reduce, and they're going to change from attachments to like, oh, I just like them. They won't have that sort of insistence. The feeling of insistence is going to drop. Cool. Any other thoughts about this? All right, let's do the next one. Upadhi stopi tadmaira lapyato vyoma vanmunihi sarva vinma mudhavatti tishte, sorry, sarva vinmudhavattishte sapto vayu vacharate. Though he lives in the conditionings just as the space, the contemplative one may remain like a fool, ever unconcerned with anything, or he may move about like the wind, totally unattached. Okay, so now like we're kind of given, we're talking about the behavior, right? Like a lot of us kind of are curious about, oh, when this realization happens, what would happen to me? And here we've sort of given certain examples of like, this person may be, you know, like a fool, like unconcerned with this world, or they may be concerned, or, you know, in this case, they may move like the wind, which is like, you know, they're just like moving along with the world, wherever the world kind of is moving them in, you know, whatever's happening in the world, they engage and they become sort of like useful to whatever problems that are happening in the world, right? Like if you can think of like one way to live, which is you're always responding to things which are happening around us. So, you know, right now there's COVID. So what is needed is like for us to be a little bit safe. Maybe we need some health professionals. So we may need like, you know, some education for some people, like all of these like things. So there's like always certain things that we can do based on the given situation that is happening right now. And some people kind of become that way, where they're always rising to the occasion and like, you know, like the wind. The wind is like, you know, blowing and just doing things based on, you know, the current situation right now. Or they may just remain like a fool, which means that, you know, they just, you know, continuing to do what they're doing and like unconcerned with what's happening around the world because they have a place that they can go to, which is beyond both this, beyond the physical, beyond the mental and the physical. And say that, you know, the first part of the verse where they say that, you know, this person lives in the conditionings, which is just like, you know, it's not like you're not going to like be on this planet anymore. We're still in this planet, we're still conditioned, or rather the body will still be conditioned and the mind will still be conditioned by, you know, the thoughts that are happening. So, you know, just like the physical body has like physical objects to deal with, the mental body and the mind has mental thoughts to deal with. Right now, you know, the mental world is very different than the mental world that was 30 years ago. You know, back in the like I would say 70s or 80s, classic rock was like the music which was popular. Now it isn't so, right? Like so the mind has changed a little bit. So like that, those kinds of social changes are happening all the time. So the mind will have to deal with that, and the body will have to deal with whatever is going on in the world. But the self, the space, this awareness is ever free from that. So the person, you know, the person who I am, which I could be, you know, right now, you know, I work in the tech industry. So like that person may not continue to be and engage in that same way, or they may do something completely different. It doesn't matter, because what the body does and what the mind does not change the self. So this is kind of like giving us sort of an insight into like, you may continue to do the same things after realization, or you may, you know, completely change. Doesn't matter, because what's going to happen is we're going to be free from the insistence of what the mind wants to do. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any thoughts about this? Okay, I think they're going to continue down the same sort of idea as well. So we're going to get some different viewpoints about this. So let's do the next one. Upadhi vilayad vishnau nirvishesham vishen munihi jale jalam viyadvan mi tejas tejsi vayatha. So on the dissolution of the upadhis, the contemplative one is totally absorbed in Vishnu, the all-pervading attributeless spirit, like water into water, space into space, or light into light. All right, so here we are given this word called upadhis, which essentially is the Sanskrit word for conditionings, which is what are my limitations? And from my experience right now, my limitations are the physical body and the mind. That's basically the limitations. So anything that is physical is limited. And why? Because firstly, it exists only for a certain amount of time, right? Like this body is only there for a certain amount of time. This mind is, also maybe sharp for some amount of time, and then it starts to degrade. So everything that is physical has a temporary, you could say, a lifespan of operation. And if we are only identified with the physical, like if our entire identity rests on the physical, then we're going to think that we are limited. Like I am not smart enough, or I am not sharp enough, or I am not, I'm not young enough. Like all these sort of like thoughts that we have only exist because our identity is at the level of the physical. But when this identity shifts and goes to the non-physical, which is the self is non-physical, has no qualities, hence it's not physical. So when that happens, this sort of given here, like the person who is contemplative, or like the yogi here, is totally absorbed in Vishnu, which is the word we use to describe the self. So self has lots of names. You hear of Shiva, you hear of Vishnu, you hear of Brahman, you hear of Atman. All of those are essentially the all-pervading attributeless spirit. That's also another word you hear in like the Western world. So essentially these are all words, because language always kind of falls short in like trying to describe this. So different cultures have different words, but the idea and the experience is the same, which is this entire world, you could say, merges into the self. And a good analogy or a good experience to explain that is like, okay, if I were to ask you, think about what you ate for breakfast this morning, or if you haven't eaten breakfast, what did you eat for dinner last night? And imagine the meal. So maybe close your eyes, like let's go through the process of thinking about what you ate exactly. So imagine the plate in front of you. Imagine the different things that were on the plate, in detail. Maybe if you can go in, you can feel, when the food was hot, you can feel the heat of the food, you can smell the food. And now imagine, like, come back to this, and now maybe look at the clothes that you're wearing, look at the color, feel the sensations of the clothes on your body. So now if I were to ask you, what happened to that plate of food that you were thinking about? Where did it go? And the experience, we can use language and say, oh, that plate got merged into my consciousness. Like it just kind of got absorbed. Like it's not there anymore. I can think about it and then it comes back for me. But that plate is gone, not available anymore. So it's like it's getting absorbed. So essentially what's happened is, we are using language to explain that experience. So you can say, oh, I'm not paying attention to that plate anymore, so it's not available for me. I'm paying attention to what's in front of me right now. So that's what is in my awareness. So whatever I pay attention to, that is what I'm aware of. So when we start to sort of make our mind single pointed and focus it to a one point, we are essentially like merging, you could say. And whatever is this physical world, my world of thoughts, all of them are not available in my experience, and they become, single pointed, and it kind of like laser sharp, you could say. And then what happens is, even that after some time, even the laser point melts, and it, the word we can, the analogy here is like water into water, like everything is becoming just like water. So just one substance, or space into space, or light into light. So that's kind of what's happening. And when this absorption happens, this world disappears. Just like, oh, what happened to the plate? It disappeared. What happened to the sensation of the clothes? That also disappeared. So everything is sort of disappearing if you're not paying attention to it. And the mind has to kind of have a movement or think about something for that thing to kind of be concrete in our experience. Otherwise, the potentiality of things is always there. So, the potentiality of thinking about the plate is there. It's just that it hasn't reached its actual form. The same way the potentiality of anything is always there, right? Like anything that's being created in this world, the potential is there in the self. And from the self, based on like my attention and energy I put into it, it gets created, or you can say it gets reflected in a way. And it exists for a certain amount of time, and then it goes away. So that's why, you could say like, this has a good explanation of the Big Bang, which is the potentiality of the Big Bang was also in the self. And then from that came the Big Bang in this world. So all of that, or the potentiality is always there. And then based on like desire, this potentiality kind of becomes into its concrete form. But then the reverse process is that, everything also merges back into this potential, which is the self. Any thoughts about this?
Could you just define upadhis again, and also maybe explain why do they use Vishnu instead of Brahman or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, this is poetry, so they just like using different words, but essentially it means the same. Vishnu is Brahman, and you could say Vishnu. You could say, so. I guess we are going to get into the the next verses where they're going to talk about what the worship of even the deity means, and why prayer, and what is prayer, and what is like worship, and that maybe we are introducing certain words here which are kind of more devotional and based, because Vishnu is essentially like the common understanding of Vishnu is that he is the creator. Sorry, he's not the creator, he's the sustainer of this world. So there's three principles in this, I would say, not just in the Hindu religion, but in just like in our experience, which is there is this creation that happens, which is something gets created from this, not existing before. From not existing, something gets created. And then once it gets created, it has to be held in place for some amount of time. So you have to put in energy to maintain it. And then once the energy of it goes away, it kind of starts to dissolve and starts to degrade and die, essentially. And the three principles exist in all of physical objects. Like you look at anything which is physical, and you will see these three dimensions operating at the same all the time: creation, the existence, and then destruction. And the words we use in this work in the Hindu philosophy or the Eastern philosophy is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Those are the three sort of dimensions. And Vishnu here is like the sustenance principle, like giving energy to something and making it like exist and it sustain. So from that standpoint, like you could say you're sustaining your attention and you're sort of like merging it into that dimension. But that's like me analyzing it a little bit. But essentially, this is the just another word you can say that's used to describe the self. So that's Vishnu. And upadhis, your second question, that's essentially like conditionings. So my limitations. So my limitations that I am my body, limitations that I have a certain kind of personality, that I'm smart or I'm intelligent, I'm stupid, I'm funny, I'm not funny. All of these limitations that we put on the self, on the I, that's an upadhi. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Let's do the next one. Yalla bhana pare labho yat sukhana param sukham yajnanana param jnanam tad brahmet yav dharayet. So realize that to be Brahman, the attainment of which leaves nothing more to be attained, the blessedness of which leaves no other blessing to be desired, and the knowledge of which leaves nothing more to be known. Okay, so once this happens, where this world has sort of merged into Vishnu in the previous word, or merged into something, right? Like the same place where the plate got merged into. It went somewhere. And that was our experience. We were thinking about the plate and then not thinking about the plate. So where did the plate go? It merged somewhere, or it got absorbed into something else. And that's place, that is Brahman. So now we can kind of have something real to work with, which is start to see where are these, like, you'll never see that place as an object because it is the subject. Just like you will never see your eyes. You can only see a reflection of your eyes. You can, see it in a mirror. You can, have somebody take a picture of it. But you yourself can never see your eyes, because the eyes is, you can never turn your eyes and say, oh, and point your other eye to this other eye, right? Like that's never going to happen. So it's through which you can see. In the same way, the self, you will never see the self as like, you see the plate or you see the sensation of the clothes. It is by which you perceive the plate, and it's by which you perceive the sensation. So knowing that, even though you cannot see your eyes, you never doubt that you see. In the same way, just even though you can never see yourself, you don't doubt that you exist. So realize that place to be Brahman, where the thoughts get merged, where that plate got merged, where the sensation of the clothes got merged, all of those things getting merged, that place is Brahman. And once we see that clearly, without any other objects in its perception, once we have this aha that, oh, that is what it is. In our meditations, we may be starting to get to a place where, things start to get quietened down, or maybe you're just, thoughts are flowing by. You're not getting involved in them. You're just watching them like a movie. And what's happening is in those moments is that you are recognizing that, I'm just awareness. And this awareness is just always has this property of revealing things. And the thoughts that are playing in the mind are getting revealed. It's like watching a river flow by. And, you may have thoughts about something that's happened in the past, or you may have thoughts about something that's happening, in the future, whatever. They're just flowing by and you have uninvolved just watching. And that substratum is Brahman. And what's going to happen is, as the river keeps flowing by, if we keep watching uninvolved, there is a limited amount of thoughts that flow. And after a point, when the last thought has flowed, before the next thought flows again, there is this gap. And in that gap, the clear perception of Brahman is revealed. And once we have this attainment, then we realize that, nothing more is to be attained, because whatever we were seeking is that we are seeking Brahman. If you look at all the desires that we actually have, what do we want? We want to be blissed out. We want, if you can say, actually, no, I want to be socially successful. I want to be, financially successful. I want to be like, intellectually successful. But that's just on the surface, right? Like if you go a little bit deeper, like, why do you want to be socially successful? Ask the 5 whys. That's a good framework to answer any question. Why do you want something? Then you can give an answer. And then you go 5 levels deeper. It'll all boil down to, oh, I think this is going to make me happy. That's the essence of every endeavor in life. It may look very diverse from the outside, but the essence of it is like, I have a deep belief that getting this is going to make me happy, or it's going to make my life better, which is essentially, it's going to make my life happier. And once we realize Brahman, we realize that happiness was never out there in the first place. It's in here. And this sort of like happiness is available, or you couldn't even say happiness so much. You can say the bliss, the level of blissfulness is there all the time. And once I attain this and I realize that, oh, it's here, not there, then there's nothing more to be attained. Because whatever you attain, you're going to reveal the same bliss. So now the world is going to become a lot easier to go through. And you're going to do the things that you, not what you want to do from a sort of insistence or like a compulsive standpoint. We're going to start to do things that are useful, or we may want to be creative, we may want to express ourselves. They're going to become more about a creative expression rather than like a compulsive, like I need to do this because I think this is going to make me happy. So like the relationship to our world will sort of shift, where we won't do things out of compulsion. And then like the next part of this is the blessedness of this leaves no other blessing to be desired. Because what is blessing doing? Which we think that, oh, I want to be blessed. Why do I want to be blessed? Because I think that's going to give me a little bit more joy, a little bit more like excitement in life. But that also breaks down, because this itself is like the biggest blessing, which is like blessing is coming out moment to moment. So like nothing is really desired after that. And then the last one, which is the knowledge of which needs nothing more to be known. This is interesting as well, because we have reached the source of knowledge, which is what is it by which everything is known. Like the self is the one that's revealing things for me, right? So I'm revealing, like the fact that I'm looking at a cup and analyzing it can only happen because there is a sense of awareness that allows me to like look at something. And the world is diverse, so I can spend infinite amounts of time trying to gain knowledge about the world. It's endless, right? There's infinite amount of things to be known. But the self, the source of it, is like, what is this place where if I know this, I can know all? That is the self, because the basic sort of material cause of everything is the self. And once you know the material cause, everything else is just a sort of expression or a sort of combination of things which look different, but from a material standpoint, it is the same thing. So this is what happens. This is why people pursue this. And this is not just, I mean, you can take it to be a hypothetical concept. If this is not an experience for you right now, fine. Don't believe anything. Take it as a hypothesis and see if this is true for you. If not, don't reject it. Like be very sort of scientific, you could say, in this method. Any thoughts about this one? All right, let's do the next one. Yad drishtva na param drishyam, yad bhutva na punar bhavaha, yad gyatva na param gyeyam, tad brahmet yavadharayet. Oh wait, we already did this. 54, 55, oh sorry, 56. Tirya gurdha vamadha purnam satchitananda madvayam anantam nityam ekam yat brahmet yavadharayet. So this is a beautiful verse. So the one, the eternal, non-dual, infinite, which pervades all the quarters, above, below, and all that which exists in between, which is of the nature of existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute. Realize that to be Brahman. So this is a meditation verse as well, which basically means that in your meditation, when your mind is a little quiet, read this verse and see if these words actually ring a bell, or like, you can connect with this verse while you're meditating, because this is essentially describing what the self is. So let's break it apart. So the one, the one is because like it's non-dual, like, when the world kind of disappears, when I'm only focused on this sort of awareness of me, this something within me that is awareness itself, and I just focus on that, that just has this quality that it has nothing else other than just awareness in it. So that feels like one substance. That's why, we say it's non-dual, and we don't really call it oneness. This philosophy isn't called oneness philosophy, right? It's called non-dual philosophy. And the reason is because our experience says that it's true. I see a world. I am separate from this world. That's my experience. But when we try to analyze it, we see that, oh, it's actually one. Like, I am not separate from this world is what, the mirror isn't separate from the objects in the mirror, right? Or rather, the objects isn't separate from the surface of the mirror. Like, if there was no mirror, it wouldn't have objects in the back and behind the mirror, right? In the same way, the self is, and then these objects are in the self. Like, they wouldn't exist apart from the self. So which is why, this oneness is sort of, we don't use oneness as a way to describe this. We say it's non-dual. And then the second one, eternal, it has no beginning, it has no end. So from a subjective standpoint, you can never say that you have died. You can say that, or, you can say the body has sort of come in and out of existence. So like, when I go to sleep, this body is not available for perception. When I wake up, the dream body isn't available for perception. Physical objects come in and go because of like, I had a bicycle when I was like younger, now I don't, or I had a tricycle when I was like a toddler, now I don't. All of those things come and go. But this self, this awareness or this awareing faculty is on all the time. There's no point when I was not on. So that from that standpoint, from my experience, I have been eternal so far. This is the only thing which has been eternal for me from my subjective experience. Everything else I can say has been temporary. So from that, always look at this from a subjective standpoint. It doesn't make any sense to like think about this from like, oh, I wonder what the self is, like thinking of the self as some sort of an idea. It is all about looking at my own subjective experience and my own awareness I have right now and saying, oh, is this changing? Right now, I'm aware of this room. A moment from now, I may be, I may go to a different place and I'll still be aware there. When I was like in an intense conversation with like my coworker, I was aware even then. When I was fighting with my partner, I was aware even then. When I was talking to my parents, I was aware even then. So all of those experiences diverse in the experience, but this awareness is always on. So from that standpoint, it's always eternal. Like there's no place where it's not. And then the next one, non-dual, we kind of covered this. It's infinite in the way that, no matter the experience, this awareness is the foundation and the basis of it. I am, in America, it's going to be the same. I go to a different country, it's going to be the same. I'm going to go, the time of day, it doesn't matter. It's morning, evening, night, that awareness is still there. And then this infinite, it pervades like which direction could you say it is more or less, right? Like if I look left, it is there this side. If I look there, it's there this side. So it's the basis. This awareness is the basis of everything. In this awareness, I can see I can see a desk here, or I can see the wall, or I can see trees in the side over here. So there's, going in any direction, up, down, left, right, within, without. So if I look internally, I'm like, oh, I can sense, there's some thoughts that I can feel. It feels like it's internal. I can sense some sensations of like my body. There's like, air going into my lungs. I can sense like, blood moving around, or like my heart beating. All of these things feel internal, like within, but like externally, I can see like, I have a bottle in front of me. I have this book here. There's like a screen. All of these things are there. But the basis, the context in which all of these things exist, this awareness pervades. And where does it end? Like, I think we had that exercise. It's like, I can see a star, which is like, looks so far away. But, how far can I see? Is there an end? Will there ever be an end? And let's say, I were to be transported to like a different planet, which is like, a bazillion light years away. Will my awareness change there? Will I not be aware of things in that place? So awareness is never, is sort of the basis of every experience. You cannot have any experience without this awareness. So just like, you cannot have objects in a mirror without the mirror. There has to be mirror for objects to be reflected in the mirror. So the same way. So that substratum and its nature is what? It is existence, consciousness, bliss. So that's Sat Chit Ananda. This is like a beautiful sort of these three words that explain, the nature of the self. And it's absolute. And what does absolute mean? That it never changes. You can say, happiness gained by eating some junk food is limited. It exists for some amount of time. If I eat one burger, I'll feel pretty happy. If I eat two, maybe a little bit happier. But three, I start to get a little bit full. 4, 5, then it becomes pain, right? And then I'm, suffering if I eat 10 burgers. So there's this limited nature of like bliss in objects. But there is some bliss which is absolute. And wow, wouldn't we want to access that? What can be absolute? Only something that is permanent, which never changes. And what never changes? Try to find something in your experience which never changes. And if you look for something external, you're going to be disappointed, because whatever is physical is going to change. So now the question becomes, so the only search or the only question or the only seeking that we ever do is to find this unchanging thing, because that's what we're all seeking. Because what is safety? We try to feel safe and secure by trying to freeze the external. It's like, I want to freeze something in this point of time. I may want to freeze the amount of wealth I have so that it just doesn't change. If I'm rich, I'm trying to control that. If I have like a very successful social thing, I don't want to change that. I want to contain that. So we're trying to freeze external things, but that's a very sort of futile endeavor, because it's only a matter of time when it changes. Either like some stock market crashes, or like somebody dies, or like somebody breaks up with you. That doesn't work, and all of us is trying to freeze. So that sense of security means that we are freezing things and holding it in place, but it doesn't work, and we're always ending up disappointed. So is there something that never changes? So there's no question of freezing it or holding it in place. And that's the only search that's the only real search that is fruitful, because in the end, you do find something that is unchanging. And once you find that, then you're free. So realize that to be Brahman. And this is like, again, another beautiful meditation verse. Any thoughts about this one? Okay.
If there's no thoughts, can we just back up and make? So I'm out of. I thought we started with 51.
Oh, did we?
Did we or no? I thought we started with.
We started with
Jivan
51.
Mukta.
Yeah, we started with 51.
Did we miss one?
Possible. Blessing.
No,
Yeah.
where's
I
54?
think we might have skipped the last one. I think that maybe the last one looked similar to the one before that. So yeah, I think maybe, let me check.
53, 54.
I think 55.
Yeah, we haven't done 55 so far. We've only done. Oh, I see what you mean. We skipped 55. You're right.
Okay, good. Didn't want to lose my mind.
Okay.
Well, actually, I do.
Sorry about that. Let's do 55. Before we do this, did anyone have thoughts about 56? Okay, let's do 55. Yad drishtva na param drishyam, yad bhutva na punarbhavah, yad gyatva na param gyeyam, tad brahmyet yavadharayet. So this is again a meditation verse. So realize that to be Brahman. Having seen which, nothing more remains to be seen. Having become which, one is not born again in this world. and having known which, nothing remains to be known. Cool. So continuing down like the, similar sort of pattern and sequence, like once we realize what happens, nothing more remains to be seen. So this becomes a more question of like, why do we want to see different things? Why do we want to experience new things? One could be out of like sense of like, oh, I think those things are like, have this quality of like making me feel good. But then, when we realize that what is this world, it's nothing but consciousness. Even though it's so diverse, this person who has realized Brahman realizes that this world is nothing but consciousness. So no matter the diversity of experience, no matter like which country you're living in, no matter where you are, what people around you, it is nothing but Brahman, which is the self and consciousness appearing as the world that we are experiencing right now. So because this realization happens, you realize everything is the same. It may appear different, but it's the same. So this deep insistence of like wanting change and like wanting things to be different than they are drops. So because, and then there's nothing more remains to be seen. So it becomes more of like, okay, if things are changing in front of me, great. Like if I have the opportunity to travel and like see different parts of the world, that's great. But there's no insistence anymore. There's no like, oh, I have to do this, because you realize that there's, everything is the same. And then the second part, like having become which, one is not born again in this world. So, there's two ways we can look at this idea. The concept of birth is that, this physical body is born, right? Like I was born and you were born, and then we had this body, and then we kind of like live for some amount of time, and then we die. And then, Eastern religions and Eastern cultures have this concept of rebirth of the physical, which means that the body then finds, or rather the subtle body, so the collection of, the impressions, which is the mental impressions, the memory, I think at the beginning of the book, we said that we have a physical body, we have a subtle body, right? There's two bodies in there. So the subtle body is the one that kind of is, reborn. The physical body collapses at the end of this life, and the subtle body, if it still has unfulfilled desires, it will then find another body to fulfill the desires. Because, the fact that I need to be successful in this world or be liked by like some idea of being liked, if that is still a deep desire, and if it's unfulfilled in this life, we are going to want to seek it out again. And in order to seek it out, we will create a body, or rather, that's kind of how this work explains it, is that there's, or at least like Buddhism and Hinduism would talk about it, is that because of this deep desire, another body would be created for us. And in that body, we will try to fulfill whatever desires are remaining. And this keeps going on for lifetimes until we get to a place where we don't keep creating new desires. Because what happens if we unconsciously engage with the world and we have desires is that we end up with more desires. Right now I wanted to, buy this house. It's like a, good enough house now, but like after 5 to 10 years, this house becomes too small. Now I want like a 5-bedroom house. Once that happens, I want like 3 cars. Then I want like, the best car. I want the best gadgets. Like once we realize that, or rather, if we are unconsciously like creating these desires, we're only going to multiply our desires, because we don't know. We think that, the objects have happiness. So if that's our belief, then the objects are just going to increase and infinite, because you get one thing, we want 100 more things. So that's sort of like an, never ending sort of source of desires. But once we start to cut desires, which is I have now a bundle of desires, I'm not going to add to them, but now it's only going to fulfill them. So that way, I have a desire for getting the best phone. I get it. I realized that it didn't really give me what I wanted. So my insistence of getting the best phone is gone. Like, okay, that's been satisfied. Now I look at my next desire. So we kind of like go through one desire at a time, maybe. And then our bundle desire starts to reduce. And from the, if we don't have a body fit enough to fulfill whatever is remaining, because let's say we pass and we are old, this work says we are going to find another body which will kind of fulfill this. And our bundle of memory and impressions go with us. So the yoga and the work that we have done in this life is still with us in the next life. So this is the woo-woo stuff. No, you don't have to believe any of this. So that's from a physical body's perspective. But what is absolutely true for us, which can be understood to be true for us, is the subtle body's rebirth. So if we look at our own life, in this life, who we were 10 years ago is very different than who we are right now. So you can say that, my personality, my subtle body is changing moment to moment. And my sense of ego, right? Like this sense of like, oh, I am such an important person. I am like the greatest. I am better than this other person. That's something that is an event, which means that it has to be created. Maybe right now I'm not feeling like a very like my ego is sort of thin. So I'm not like feeling like a person right now that much. But let's say I'm driving on the, on the highway and somebody cuts me off. That moment, my ego kind of like is created. It's like, oh, how dare this person cut me off? I'm going to show them a lesson. And like, you kind of like, honk at them or like, maybe cut them off. This happens a lot in India, by the way. So in those moments, like ego is being created. And what's happened, you can say, is that the ego is reborn. And the ego comes, it exists for a second, you release your anger and whatever emotion you're feeling, that kind of gets released. And then over a period of time, it kind of thins again. And then again, some activity or some event happens and the ego is created again. So you can see that this ego is being born and killed. So it's like it takes birth, it exists for a while, and it dies. And once you realize Brahman, this ego is never born again. Because what happens is that our investment in looking good or in feeling important or, our belief that I am this person is destroyed. And because it's destroyed, this ego never comes up again. And from that standpoint, we can say one is never born again, which means that this ego is never born again. And this is a true experience that's going to happen, that happens for every one of us. This ego comes up for whatever reasons, like any trigger, my ego gets created. If you're living with like, let's say your family and like they're triggering you, your ego comes up. If you're like, like somebody on the street insults you, your ego comes up. So these are events that trigger ego. So the ego is being born. It exists for a while, depending on how intense the experience is, and then it goes. So that's that, so once this work kind of works on us, this process works on us, and we realize Brahman, that sort of ego, the mind itself dissolves. So once the mind dissolves, the ego isn't available. So the ego is never born again. And then once we knowing this Brahman, nothing remains to be known. So there's no sort of deep urge to say, or this insistence to say, I want to know this, because we realize that everything is consciousness. Kind of like, alluding to this previous verse that we went through. If everything is consciousness, like there's no deep desire for, this insistence of desire. If something happens and a new experience comes into your, you have an opportunity to experience something new, great, you will go through with it. Which is why, the verse of like being like the wind or being like a leaf, another beautiful image is like we become like a leaf that's like kind of like a dead leaf, you can say. And it's being blown by the wind. And what does that mean? It means it has no intrinsic desire of its own. It's just happy to kind of flow with the wind. Wherever you want, you can take me. Or like a leaf in a river. It's just flowing. Wherever the river is, there is this force of this world. The world is changing. Everybody has certain desires that they want to fulfill. and they want it to go a certain way. And if you're around like people who are like, want to do things, you may do it with them because, your past life has made you friends with them. I mean, your past experiences have made you good friends with them, and now you're just enjoying whatever is happening around you. So you can be from that standpoint, or you can craft your own destiny, which is no longer will you unconsciously, do things. Like you will now consciously say, okay, this is what I want to do in my life. These are the things I need to do to get there. And if they work, great. If you fail, that's fine too. But you will consciously start moving in a particular direction, and it won't be unconscious and it won't be accidental. So both ways are fine. It just depends on the kind of person you are. Cool. Any thoughts about that? Okay, let's maybe do one more. Advaya vritti rupena Vedanter lakshaye dvayam akhandanandamekam yat brahma yat yavadharayet. So realize that to be Brahman, which is non-dual, indivisible one, and blissful, and which is indicated in the Vedanta as the immutable substratum, realized after the negation of all tangible objects. Cool. So this is a meditation verse again. So all of these are meditation verses. So, if you're meditating and you feel a little quiet, you feel like your mind has calmed down, read this verse. So realize that to be Brahman, which is non-dual. So the same sort of idea, which is, if our mind is not focused on the stuff, we start to sense this sense, like we start to get a taste of this awareness, like the Sufis, which is, a tradition from the Islamic culture, which is also a tradition for realizing God. And they are more from a devotional standpoint. They have this beautiful expression of like, this person has a taste of the self or taste of God. And what does that mean? It just means that this person can kind of go there. And because you can go there, we can, when we come in contact with certain people or certain places, there's a sense of like holiness to the place, where you can feel a little bit, blissful just by being in the presence of the place or the person. And what's happened there is that the person, usually it's people that make a place holy, and or thought atmospheres which make a place holy. And this person who is, reveling in the self, or who has a taste, or who can go there, they kind of radiate this sort of bliss and peace around them. And if our mind is a little sensitive enough, where we are not like noisy, you can kind of feel it. And this kind of happens when we go into nature. If you go to a really old tree, being in California, we're really lucky to be around like beautiful national parks, which have like 1,000-year-old trees. If you have ever been to an ancient forest, and if you haven't been to an ancient forest, highly recommend going to an ancient forest, which is like a place which has 1,000-year-old trees, or like maybe 2,000-year-old trees. Why? Because those trees have gotten life for that long, and they kind of radiate. They're like the natural temples of this world. And the life there is so strong, you can feel the tree. And as we start to get a little bit more in touch with this self within us, we will start to connect to life on a completely different level, which is not, you'll start to feel other people's, you can start to feel other people's emotions. And the sense of we talk about, oh, we should be compassionate, or we should be loving. Like right now it may seem like you should be, right? But then after a point, this will be like, you cannot help yourself but be compassionate, because you can feel other people. And that's what kind of starts to happen. And this sense of connection with life becomes so much more stronger, where, it becomes a moment-to-moment experience. Moment to moment, we will feel life a lot more. And So continuing along, so that becomes what is blissful, because bliss is what? It is the self. And if we are in tune with the self all the time, we are blissful all the time. No matter the situation, we're living in a kind of a tough time right now. It's coronavirus, and there's been a lot of pain and suffering because of it. But despite that, there can be access to this bliss, because it is available moment to moment. And the next part is indicated in the Vedanta, which is what we are studying. Vedanta is like the end of the Vedas. That's the literal definition. But also Vedanta means end of knowledge, which means what piece of knowledge will satisfy me, where I will not seek more. Human beings are like, we have this capacity of wanting to know more. There's no end. Because we have this urge and this desire of like, I'm not satisfied right now, I want to seek something new. And then when we seek something new, I'm not satisfied by that either, so I seek something new. So from that standpoint, what is that knowledge that will end my searching? This unsatisfaction, what will end my unsatisfaction? And that is this knowledge, the knowledge of the self, and not something external, but within me. And this is recognized to be as the immutable substratum. So because this is unchanging, immutable, that's what it means. And it's the basis. It's the consciousness of all my experiences. So it's like the mirror, the analogy is like, without the mirror, there would not be reflections of the mirror. Like you cannot show me a reflection without a mirror. Like there's no such thing. So reflections are part of the mirror. In the same way, this world is part of consciousness. The world cannot exist without consciousness. And once that is clearly recognized, and how does that happen? It's by negation of all objects. So in my meditation, I'm not focusing on the world. I'm focusing on just a single pointed thing, single pointed attention on, let's say, my breath. That's also good enough. Or the gap between my breath. That's also good enough. Or if you can get to a place where you can start to feel that this sky-like, I would say, sky-like presence of the self. It's like this infinite space. You can focus on that. That's also fine. But what's happening is we're focusing on one thing. And because of that single pointed focus, everything else is like out of focus. And when that happens, the objects get negated and then the self is realized, because, there's nothing else which is grabbing our attention. So that's the process. And this is all of the hypothetical benefits, you could say, for us right now. But if we are earnest and we continue in this work, it's bound to produce. It's like this, because this is not some sort of like we're talking about I here. This is not some external thing. Everybody has this. You don't need to acquire this. You don't need to gain it. It's just a question of recognition. We only have to recognize that we have this. So this work is, all we're doing is, it's like, clearing the fog from my glasses. That's all it's doing. And once the fog is cleared, this is recognized. So if you're earnest and we keep doing this, and we are not reading everything, but like doing what is being said, it is bound to produce results. So I hope this happens. And I think this is probably a good place to stop for the class section, and we'll do a meditation. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, so let's do a meditation. We have about 15 minutes. Cool. So if you've not been sitting, I would highly suggest closing your eyes and sitting up straight. Let's start by taking a few deep breaths. And just noticing that by paying attention to anything, we immediately recognize that we are in this position of being a witness. We can say, that become a witness, but we can never really become a witness. We are always a witness. So when you look at anything, there's always two directions in which we can throw energy. One direction is on the object. So I can throw energy at the breath and say, oh yes, the breath is there, it's moving and this and that. And then the other direction is the inner direction, which is recognizing that, oh, I'm the witness in this experience of noticing the breath. So I'm aware of the breath, but I'm also aware that I'm aware. You can say that I am. So while you're breathing, just keep noticing that I am. I am aware. And then I am aware of breathing. But I am aware is the basis of any experience. If your mind is thinking about a thought, you can also experience the thought. It may be a memory, but also you can notice that I am aware, even while thinking about something. Because this I am aware is always there. It's the basis. So in your meditation, whatever is happening, if your mind is thinking, if you're paying attention to the body, paying attention to the sensation, if you're thinking about the future, always be aware of this other aspect, that I am aware. Keep this in the background. Like maybe 25% of your energy or your attention is on this I am aware, 75% is on the other thing. But make this something that is consistently there, or you're recognizing consistency throughout your day, not just in your meditation. Meditation is a great place to practice. So I'm aware of even these instructions, and I'm listening to the instructions. So this self-remembering, you could say, keep this self-remembering on. Keep recognizing that I am aware, I am on. Slowly bring your attention back to the world. Ready? You may open your eyes. Let's end the class with a chant. Screen. Yogarato va, bhogarato va, yogarato va, bhogarato va, sangarato va, sangavihina, sangarato va, sangavihina, yasya brahmani ramate cittam, yasya brahmani ramate cittam, nandeti nandeti nandatyeva, nandeti nandeti nandatyeva, nandeti nandeti nandatyeva. So again, the English of this verse is the essence of this work, which is to revel in the self. No matter if you're alone or with people, if you're going after pleasures and desires in this world, or if you're, being a renunciate, doesn't matter what you're doing, but only if you have access to the self can you really enjoy this world. So I hope this is a reality for all of you. And how lucky we are to kind of get in contact with this work. I personally feel very blessed. It takes a lot of struggle to finally come to this place where we now have access to a process that can free us. You can look at this world and look at how many people there are and look at what they're doing and look at what we're doing. So I feel very blessed to have, come in contact with this work, and all of us are together. It's wonderful. So I guess exercise for this week is to kind of continue down the meditation that we were doing, which is not only in your meditation, be aware of this I am, this background, this substratum, but in all of your waking hour experiences. So right now, you are aware that I am, and I'm listening to whatever's going on. But in the background, I know that I am, and I'm paying attention to that I amness. And I'm also paying attention to this world. And you'll see, you may think that that's an inefficient way to live life, where, I'm not fully engaged in whatever's going on, but you'll see that, no, that's actually, you become way more efficient, because most of our energy is focused on random thoughts that's happening in the mind. We're going to start to cut those down and just pay attention to this I amness. And you'll see that moment to moment, you're going to become a lot more efficient in any activity that you're doing. So that's the exercise of this week. Just throughout your day, just pay attention to this I am. You're going to forget, but keep remembering as much as you can. And this process is called self-remembering. So nice name for it. Let's all self-remember and try to self-remember as much as possible throughout your day. Cool. That's it for this class. I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions.
Thanks, Puneet, and thanks for sending me the link to last week's video.
Yeah, of course. Good to have you back, Nick.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Puneet. Have a great week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.